This is TWiT.
I got a rundown, and I got a really annoying story that I have to say put me in a blue funk. This is from the Wall Street Journal. A few blockbuster podcasts are making all the money.
This is seriously what has ruined it all. Is this search for scale? You have to be huge, when that's not what podcasting is about.
Yeah.
Ruined it.
Alex Cooper, so you remember Call Her Daddy? Mm-hmm. And I was a little saddened when Spotify gave her $60 million for 3 years. Well, those 3 years are up. She is now nearing a $100 million deal for Call Her Daddy.
Me.
Wow. Joe Rogan.
There's no way they're profiting from that. No way.
Well, this is serious. This is the satellite guys. Spotify's working for a second season with Trevor Noah. He probably produces. If you're a celebrity on TV, even if you're a B-list celebrity on TV, that brings some audience along.
Still getting millions.
I was like an H-list celebrity on TV, and even I got some bang from that. Joe Rogan inked a deal with Spotify worth up to $250 million. Kelsey brothers are the next, Jason and Travis Kelsey. This is the Taylor Swift effect.
They do it. No. Nothing to do with Taylor
Swift. It's a great podcast.
Nothing to do with her.
Nothing to do with it.
She's a hell of a talent, but there's nothing to do with her.
I like how Aunt really stepped up on that one.
Oh, I'm so sick of that.
Why? If he
good.
weren't dating Taylor,
he would still be just fine.
It would still be a big podcast.
Yeah. He wouldn't be.
Is it a great? Why? I haven't listened to it.
Him and his brother.
They're very funny.
They have a great dynamic, and they have great stories because of the path that they both chose. Neither one of them went on the same path, even though they both ended up in the NFL, and probably going to both end up in the NFL Hall of Fame.
That's cool.
But
do they have a pink sippy cup water bottle?
They probably have several, sir.
That's my secret.
They're ahead of the curve on that.
They can get away with that, Leo, because they are who they are.
They are the number 4 podcast in the U.S., according to Edison Research.
They're legit, yeah.
According to the journal, the podcast, this always cracks me up. When the podcast industry began 5 years ago.
5 years?
Jeez.
It always cracks me
when
up.
It began during COVID.
It was
apparently.
a hobby before that.
After a costly boom and bust cycle that spanned about half a decade. That's 5 years. The podcasting business is growing up.
Allegedly.
Oh, F me.
Podcast is turning into, this again, the Wall Street Journal, into an industry of megastars who command the most money and the biggest audiences. There are still nearly 500,000 active shows, according to Podcast Industry Insights, but the top 25 podcasts reach nearly half of the U.S. weekly listeners. The top talents have tours, merchandise, and multi-year deals in the 9 figures. Wait a minute. 1 million. That's $100 million. Big advertisers want in. So that's the other thing that's happened. And by the way, this is absolutely true. Everything I'm saying is absolutely true. What's happened is that our shows and many of the early podcasts were driven by startups. Some startups peppered most of the podcast ads for years. Mattress makers, health supplement brands, mindfulness apps, and meal kit delivery companies. We've had, what are you laughing at? We've had, you've done the ads.
The truth.
Yeah. We've had all of it. But now, podcast distributors like Spotify and Amazon are capitalizing on this dynamic. Some are experimenting with selling subscriptions for their top shows in hopes of persuading audiences to pay more to listen without ads. Get early access or exclusive bonus content.
Wonder where they got that idea.
They're making video versions of podcasts.
Oh, really?
Why didn't we think of that? And some are selling more ads to bigger brands like, this is one we aren't doing, car manufacturers and alcohol distributors.
You had car manufacturer.
I had I had Ford early on.
Right? You had Ford.
And we have had conversations with other car manufacturers. The problem is we're so small potatoes compared to Dax Shepard, that if our numbers, which are in the tens and hundreds of thousands, pale compared to Call Her Daddy and Joe Rogan.
You see, that's what's going to drive me nuts. It's and I wrote this in my book, The Gutenberg Parenthesis, which didn't sell millions either, because I'm arguing that it's mass is what's ruined all of this. We've had a long century of mass media that made scale the most important thing, that tried to put us into huge buckets of people we didn't want to be in. And media still demand to go there because the advertisers still demand to go there because they're lazy suckers. And that's not the natural state of media. It shouldn't be. And it will end because that business model is bankrupt. But in the meanwhile, we're going to suffer right here.
In my podcast list, my regular podcast list, I believe 3 of them are, quote, big celebrities. And when I was listening to one on the way into the studio, I heard an ad, and it made me wonder, okay, so they did an ad for so-and-so sponsor with / their podcast name. And I'm like, how many people are actually doing those, following
Well, we've
through?
always done that, like
Yeah.
But we have a more, I feel like we have a more genuine audience versus the masses.
But we only do it because the advertisers always demanded it. This is this was also true at Tech TV in the early days of a cable network. You do what's called direct response advertising, where because they don't have metrics and they don't have numbers, they can measure the response by having, Casper.com/TWiG.
Right.
And then they measure the response that way. But as you know, that's a very imperfect measurement because most people just type Casper.com.
Exactly.
Or
Right.
they don't think about it till a month later and we're looking for a mattress and they just go to Casper.
Right.
So it doesn't capture the impact of the advertising.
And I'm like, these cats, they're getting these sponsors week in and week out. And I don't think that metric is really going to work. But for whatever reason, because they're a celebrity, let's go ahead and sponsor them.
Honestly, I'm very happy where we are. I like being on the long tail as long as you don't step on it.
Yeah.
I like the fact that we serve a specific, dedicated, maybe not huge, but it's a decent size audience. It's as big as Tech TV was.
Yeah. That's how I feel.
And I'm happy with that. That's fine. And I don't want more than that. But it is one of the reasons we had to start the club and we're closing the studio is because the revenues are just going. It's headed upstream.
What was Tech TV's revenue at the max?
They lost $150 million a year for 6 years, I think.
Based on what revenue?
I don't know if I have the revenue numbers. I know that. So Paul Allen was the chief investor. Later, it was sold to SoftBank and then Comcast and so forth. But and Ziff Davis started it with SoftBank. But I think Paul Allen, they said he lost $600 million. And so obviously it was a bad bet. One review I'll remember that stands out in my mind, I'll never forget, said the Screensavers has the audience of largest high school in an urban center. So it was about 123,000, something like that.
Wow.
Well, we doubled that in the early days of TWiT easily. Mm-hmm. So I felt like, well, we're doing okay because we're costing 1/10 or 100th of as much and have a 10 times larger audience. But what happens if the advertisers migrate up, or the startups, and that's one thing the Journal says, these startups, these direct market advertisers have kind of pulled back because of raising interest rates and economic uncertainty or whatever. And so they're getting out of podcast advertising. So we're losing that backbone. And we're not getting the Coca-Colas or the Bacardi rums. Joe Rogan's getting those. So according to Edison, who does a pretty good job with this kind of stuff, nearly 100 million Americans, 12 and older, listen to podcasts every week. 100 million. Wow. Podcast advertising revenue projected to grow. See, this is the thing that hurts us. It's supposed to grow 12% to more than $2 billion this year, $2.6 billion by 2026, but we're not seeing that. We're not. We're seeing it's fortunate. I'll tell you where we're fortunate. There is nowhere for cybersecurity companies to advertise anymore. There's no magazines. There's only a handful of podcasts, and they're not going to go on Joe Rogan. Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they even buy the Super Bowl. I think CrowdStrike was on the Super Bowl.
Well, that makes sense. They had the pockets for it.
Yeah. But honestly, thank goodness, because they're mostly coming to us and podcasts like us. So there are some niche audiences that we can benefit from. Hey, it's Leo Laporte. I hope you enjoyed this little snippet from our show This Week in Google. For the full show, you can either go to our website, twit.tv/TWiG, or find TWiG in your favorite podcast client. And of course, there's links right below, somewhere down there, for more information.